for us, it's not necessarily remembering the past. It's pretty much remembering the past and living through the current. It's a variation of the old Soviet regime that now is in charge of Belarus. But for the broader community, history repeats itself, and we just need to know not to make the same mistakes again. That's what memory is for learning.
That idea, that history is not over, is what brings people here. In Washington, communities from around the world gather for the Roll Call of Nations, an event organized by the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, naming victims of communist regimes country by country.
The Georgian Association and the USA.
Historians estimate more than 100 million people were killed under communist rule in the 20th century. For many here, that history is not abstract.
For us Georgians, it's particularly important because Georgia suffered tremendously, having tens of thousands of victims to communism, whether through purges or through forced exile. Again, my family also experienced this by my great-grandfather being exiled and died in exile. And many of our founders for Georgian Association fled communism, Soviet government, and came through different routes to the United States, and today we're paying respects to their memory.
Georgia's experience was part of a much larger Soviet system, one built on repression, arrests, exile, and mass executions carried out without trial, reshaping society through fear, silence, and distrust.
Embassy of Ukraine.
In Ukraine, that history is now playing out in Russia's war, shaped by a Kremlin view of the collapse of the Soviet Union, what Russia's President Vladimir Putin once called a geopolitical catastrophe.
Крушение Советского Союза было крупнейшей геополитической катастрофой века.
The communist regime was about having an authoritarian government, having an authoritarian regime, denying the national identity, denying national history, denying language. And this is what Ukraine is fighting for, regaining its independence, regaining its sovereignty, and regaining its right to exist as a sovereign, independent country with its own history, language, and culture.
On Capitol Hill, Republican Congressman Joe Wilson connects the memorial's message to today's struggles in Ukraine and Georgia.
We had tens of millions of people killed during the communist regimes. And so we have a monument here reflecting the success of the people who have resisted communism and now have freedom. And of course, that would be how grateful we are for the people of Ukraine that they have resisted. We're so grateful for the people of Georgia who understand that there should be fair and free elections in Georgia, and it should not be controlled by dictators. And additionally, we know that and hope for the people of Russia. We're not against the people of Russia. The American people are opposed to war criminal Putin, not the people of Russia. So I'm hoping one day for freedom for the people of Russia. But additionally, on my visits to Ukraine to see the persistence and resilience, and Ukraine will win. And there will be victory over the war criminal Putin, and then there will be victory for the people of Georgia.
But beyond geopolitics, organizers say the bigger challenge may be how these systems are understood today.
Well, what's worrying is that 62% in a poll last year of American young adults and teenagers think that socialism or communism are good ideas, including for our own country. So it is something that's I think about quite often. And what I try to explain to them is this. First of all, it is a secular materialist philosophy, a way of thinking that doesn't value the human person, the fundamental rights, because it just sees people as tools or just chemicals and atoms that can be manipulated by elites. And second, as Martin Luther King said about communism, it comes to power and stays in power by violence, lies, and murder. There's no place where communists win an election fairly and then stay in power winning elections. In other words, it is a brutal, violent, lying propaganda machine.
Disappointment and simple promises may help explain it.
There's probably a certain level of disappointment of the quality of living. You go to college, you finish school, you go to college, and obviously you incur, a lot of student debts, and not always that you will land a job that will pay that well to even, pay for your student loans, pay rent, take care of groceries, car, and things like that. So life is expensive. So when you have these, leaders I'm sorry, I'm going to mention one of the names, like Mamdani, who promises to provide all that for free, you get all these voters. Oh, that sounds great because life is hard. Everything's expensive. I can't afford, a new car. I can't afford to support myself in the apartment or a house. So I think those, deceiving political platforms, populist platforms, are very popular, and that's how the socialist ideology gains platform and gains votes, unfortunately.
For those whose families experience communism, the reality looks very different.
I think that we have seen the romanticization of ideas of communism under disguise of equality, which is completely different thing. It's very important to distinguish the normal striving for democracy and equality within society and the ideas of communism that are not about equality but about control. And the control is being achieved through terror, and that is the main reason why it's so dangerous.
Communist governments still exist today, including in China, Cuba, North Korea, and Vietnam. And how this history is understood still shapes how these systems are seen.